folks?
Email to me.
You all ready?
All ready.
Kim, you ready? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Board of Adjustment meeting of October 23, 2019. Let's begin with the roll call, please. Ms. Yothers?
Chairman Elliott,
Here.
Mr. Urbowski, Mr. Burris,
Here.
Mr. Eisner,
Here.
Ms. Turner,
Present.
Ms. Rich.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Now, let's please silence our cell phones and other gadgets if possible. We have 3 items on the agenda, but first let's begin with our quasi-judicial announcement from our legal counsel, please.
This is a quasi-judicial proceeding where the Board of Adjustment acts in a quasi-judicial rather than a legislative capacity. At a quasi-judicial hearing, it is not the Board's function to make law, but rather to apply law that has already been established. In a quasi-judicial hearing, the Board is required by law to make findings of fact based upon the evidence presented at the hearing and apply those findings of fact to previously established criteria contained in the Code of Ordinances in order to make a legal decision regarding the application before it. The Board may only consider evidence at this hearing that the law considers competent, substantial, and relevant to the issues. If the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has met the criteria established in the Code of Ordinance, then the Board is required by law to find in favor of the applicant. By the same token, if the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has failed to meet the criteria established in the Code of Ordinance, then the Board is required by law to find against the applicant. Are there any members of the Board this evening wishing to disclose any ex parte communications or conflicts of interest?
None.
Seeing none, anyone wishing to speak this evening, if you could please stand and raise your right hand to be sworn in.
If you're going to speak tonight, please raise your hand and stand up and accept the oath.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
So sworn.
Thank you. Okay, we're allowed to deviate from the order on the agenda for extraordinary purposes. If anybody has any sick children at home or needs to catch a plane, please raise your hand and we'll try and make certain arrangements for you. But right now, the order is, first is Athens Place Apartments, which is just west of City Hall by the Pinellas Trail. Then Seabreeze Drive, Variance. And last is Variance off of Sunset Beach. So, anybody have any problem with that order on the agenda? All right, let's begin then, if you could, with our staff presentation for item number 3, which is 19-105.
Good evening, board members. Louis Cerna with Calvin Giordano and Associates, consultant for the Planning Department, presenting staff comments. This application is to authorize a 3-part variance. This property is located in Transect T4C. It's to allow for parking within the first tier of the district. It's to allow for the dumpster to be located within the second tier and to reduce the minimum requirement of 5 feet between the stormwater ponds and the property lines. This property is an atypical development in that it is a unified multifamily development that covers multiple lots and includes multiple street frontages. However, it is the type of development that is envisioned and is allowed in the T4C, which is the Uptown Character District. This applicant was granted a variance for the same 3 requests in December of 2016. The variance expired in on June 28th of 2019. The staff report does include a typo there. It's not December of this year, it's June 28th of 2019. We have reviewed this for the criteria for granting variances, and I'll just go through them briefly. The first is that the request of the variance arises out of the physical surroundings, shape, topographic conditions of the property. Again, this variance is a result of the parcels covering multiple lots and including multiple street frontages. We've included there that it includes 4 street frontages, which makes it challenging for compliance with the special area plan districts. The conditions are special circumstances, have not been self-created or not the result of actions by the applicant. the standards of the special area plan are, contain some weaknesses that are not the result of the applicants doing it. It's the result of, the envision here is that development will be for infill development or of single parcels or expansions on single parcels. So it's not the result of the applicants doing. Literal enforcement will, the third criteria is literal enforcement of the requirements of the code will have the effect of denying the applicant reasonable use of the property. We have found, based on because of the dumpster location requirements and the parking, that it would, compliance with those strict regulations because of the multiple street frontages would make the development not feasible and would be a hardship. The stormwater pond setback as well would significantly reduce the developable area of the site, which would make the development unfeasible. And we could not find a code rationale for the 5-foot setback there as well. So, and then the fourth criteria is the granting of the variance will not confer any special privileges that is not allowed for other lands or buildings. The granting of the variance would not confer special privilege on the property that would not be allowed for other lands, buildings, or structures in the same zoning district for the same type of unified development. And finally, granting of the variance will not substantially diminish property values in the surrounding areas. Again, this is a sort of development that is envisioned in the special area plan, and it would not result in negative impacts to surrounding property values. Based on these findings, staff is recommending approval of the request of the 3-part variance, and I'd be glad to answer any of your questions.
Could I start, Mr. Cerna?
Yes.
Could you explain for everybody what the term transect and tier means so that we're all familiar what we're talking about?
Yes, I'll do my best. The special area plan is divided into transects, which are basically depending on the type of development and density and intensity of development, it governs the type of development, the form of development, basically, not so much the uses, but the form of development as far as street setbacks and where buildings should be placed and height and bulk and things like that. That's how the transects are laid out. The tiers, unlike conventional zoning and the rest of the code, rather than having minimum setbacks, the transect district has maximum setbacks or build-to lines. So the buildings should generally be oriented towards the road with parking behind it and dumpsters and accessory uses behind it. And that's what it talks. That's where it mentions the tiers. That's sort of an explanation of what is sort of more of a visual sort of code. But basically, these regulations govern placements of those features, and that is what the variance request is for.
So from my understanding in the past, a transect is like there are a series of concentric circles around a center of a building, let's say, and then as you go further away from the building, then the transects change, or the tiers. It's not a vertical type of separation, it's horizontal. Regulations are different depending on how far you are away toward the periphery of the property? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
generally speaking, the building should be prominent along the road. Parking should be secondary, and that's where it talks about the second tier. And then parking and dumpsters and things like that should be further in later tiers, I guess.
Okay.
That's a simple explanation. And because of all the street frontages with this development, it makes it hard to meet those requirements with the building always in the, prominent along the roadways.
Okay, so then let's hear from the applicant if he desires to make a statement, and then from the commission, from our board members, rather. Do you want to make a statement, sir? Okay. All right, questions from the board?
I have a question.
Mr. Burris?
What's the total number of apartments?
Oh, what was it?
The total number of apartments. How many apartments?
Let me see.
It is 30
32?
Couldn't figure that out either.
I tried to. I thought it was 32, but
36 units
36.
in 3 buildings.
And then how many parking spaces? And we're assuming that this is in compliance with the requirements for the number of spaces for the,
Yeah, so there is a site plan associated with this, and it does meet the parking standards.
How many stories? 2, 3 stories on the apartment? On the buildings?
I don't think it was.
The applicants, Mr. Mavromatis, two stories, all
2
two
stories,
stories?
all of them?
More questions from the board?
Yeah, I have a question. Has there been any issues that has taken this long to get it done? Is there any issues with the original request?
There have not been issues with the city, so that perhaps the applicant could answer why it hasn't been built at this point.
Well, that's what I would like to ask, if that's okay.
Can you, Mr. Mavromatis, can you come forward, please? We've got to have you on tape.
So my question was, is there an issue that's been going on that it's taken almost 2.5 years?
There have been some issues with the parts of the site plan. It's a very challenging property. It's been very difficult with our engineer, and there's a couple of issues that have not quite been cleared up. And at some point, we decided not to do the development because it was just becoming more and more complex. And then we changed our minds and figured, let's go ahead with the project.
So then is this documentation here, the current, the replacement to what the errors were, or is it the original? You said there's been
Question.
changing.
What's changing?
You said that the architectural drawings were,
No, I didn't say that. I said with some of the site plan, we haven't changed the drawings. The drawings have stayed the same.
so those have stayed the same?
Yes.
What were the nature of the changes to the site plan?
Well, there really haven't been any changes. It's the challenges of the site. It's very challenging there. You have, and as it's progressed, quite frankly, it seems like every time we would have a meeting, something else would be brought up. Well, now we have to bring this up and bring this up. So what we were doing is continually creating the cost on that development more and more to develop it. And so that's when we said, you know what, maybe it's not the right thing to do, is to develop that site. Mainly, a lot of it has to do with drainage, and things came up that were not initially brought to our attention, and so we're working through those things now. Still haven't resolved them. There's like 4 points left, 4 or 5 points.
So have all of those things been corrected now?
No, they're currently being worked on.
So you mentioned that there's some drainage challenges that you're currently working on, correct?
Yes.
So on the one part of the variance request where it's regarding the 5-foot minimum setback between the stormwater pond and the property line, what does this variance request, where you're requesting for it to go from a varying width of 1.5 feet to 5 feet along that length of that pond, how does that impact, or what's the relationship between this variance request and those challenges you're facing with drainage?
None.
So there's no correlation between,
No, none of these variance requests have anything to do with what I'm referring to as far as the site plan challenges.
Share with us the site plan challenges that you have?
Pardon me?
Are you-
I don't think those are necessarily relevant to the variance application before you. I mean, understanding that whether or not you grant the variance or not, he still has to go through the permitting process and get those,
Sure, I understand that.
right, permitted, so I just want to make sure that we stay on
Topic,
topic, yeah.
yes, I got you.
Burris?
Yes, I have a question. I understand that the planning and zoning is recommending approval. I have a question on the elevation. You have 10 feet of floor elevation as far as flood level. And will the ponds be able, the retention ponds, be able to handle that, any excess? Or are they going to be flooded all the
There
time?
again, you're asking questions that I don't really think are relevant, number
I
one.
was-
And
yeah.
number two, but I can answer for him.
You
But
can,
it-
but I'm going to say before you answer, and you feel free, because
Okay.
obviously you can offer testimony, but whether or not he's going to have enough for stormwater drainage is going to be a question for the building department and potentially SwiftMed, depending upon how large it is, to get his drainage and his other permitting done.
Are those questions or these issues been solved by the department?
Well,
Or they're still ongoing? Any drainage issues, whether it's a retention pond or anything else?
I ask you, may I ask a question? Once again, what is the relevancy to that, to the request for the variance? Anything we
I agree.
do has to be approved by the building department, or we can't do it.
Well,
They
the,
won't let us do it. I mean, we have our Swift Mud permit. We have that in place. There's just a couple of points in there that we have to get through with the city engineers to finalize the site plan.
my answer to your question is, it does have a lot to do with it because you're asking for a variance that's closer to the stormwater pond than what is permitted.
Oh, maybe.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question for clarification purposes? This is a three-part variance that previously came before this board, is that correct?
That's correct.
Has this variance application changed since the last time that you came before this board to
Not at all.
request? Okay,
It's identical. It's just because it expired, we have to go through the process again.
okay. I just wanted to make that clarification.
Ms. McNeese, you want to make a statement, please?
Pat McNeese, Principal Planner. Just a quick clarification. The site plan has been approved. The applicant is in the building permit stage. There are some details being worked out with the drainage. It does not affect the layout, so the site plan was approved with those conditions that the drainage details be worked out. So this is the site plan that has been approved.
Thank you.
It puts a whole new light on it.
Okay, any other questions? Any, for either Ms. McNeese or Mr. Cerna, any public comments have you received from this?
No, we've not.
Okay, anybody in the audience wish to speak on this item? Seeing none? We're ready for a motion, board?
I make a motion to approve.
Second?
Second, did you get that, Kim?
Yes, thank you.
Discussion on the motion? Motion to approve the variances as requested. You still have, you have heartburn about this, or?
No,
Okay, all right. You okay?
heartburn.
All right, we're ready for a vote then.
Ms. Rich? Ms. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Eisner?
Yes.
Mr. Burris?
Yes.
Mr. Elliott?
Yes. Okay, you've got 2 years for this variance again, sir, so good luck to you. And thank you for investing in Tarpon Springs. It's not an easy project, I'm sure. Okay, I just didn't want to be sure. All right, the next one is on 1643 Seabreeze Drive. Case number is 19-118. Mr. Cerna.
Yes, this application is for a variance to reduce the minimum side yard setback from 10 feet to 7 feet and to reduce the total side yard setbacks from 25 feet to 14.5 feet for the construction of a two-car garage. The two-car garage will be attached to an existing single-family residence. This lot was platted in 1951 as a part of the Seabreeze Island subdivision, and the residence was at the site was constructed in 1972. prior to the current setback requirements. Because the principal structure does not meet the minimum side setback requirements, it is considered a non-conforming structure. The applicant's survey shows a current setback of 7 feet on the west side of the existing house and a setback of 7.5 feet on the east side. Therefore, the current non-conforming setbacks are a minimum of 7 feet and a total setback of 14.5 feet. The applicants have indicated they're proposing this garage on the front of the existing house. They've indicated that the side yard variances are required in order to align the proposed garage with the side edge of the existing house and to avoid blocking an existing window along the front of the house. They'd also noted that the garage is being built over the location of a previous location of a carport that was removed for safety reasons earlier this year. Again, staff has reviewed this for compliance with the review criteria for granting variances, and we find that it does meet the criteria. The variance is primarily due to the narrow width of the lot, and that it was lot was created prior to the current zoning setback requirements, and the house was built prior to the zoning setback requirements. Therefore, staff is recommending that approval of the variance subject to the variance expiring within 2 years of the date of approval by the Board of Adjustment.
Thank you, sir. Does the applicant wish to make a statement? For the record, they're nodding their heads no. Okay. I guess you go along with what they're recommending, right? Yes. All right, board comments, questions? To my right? My left? No. Anybody? Any public comments that you received, staff? Anybody? comments?
No comments.
Anybody in the audience wish to be heard on this item? Seeing and hearing none, let's have a motion, please.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded, discussion. All right, let's have a roll call, please, Ms. Yothers.
Ms. Rich?
Yes.
Ms. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Eisner?
Yes.
Mr. Burris?
Yes.
Mr. Elliott?
Yes. Thank you.
It was easy.
Okay, the last variance on our agenda is 19-121, 100 Shore Drive, which is just near Sunset Beach. Staff presentation, please.
Yes, this application is for a variance to reduce the minimum rear yard setback from 30 feet to 15 feet and to reduce the minimum side street setback from 15 feet to 12 feet 11 inches for the construction of a single-family residence. This property is located at the northeast corner of Shore Drive and Tallahassee Drive. The applicant was granted a variance to reduce the rear yard setback for this property from 30 feet to 20 feet, which is the same variance being requested in 2015. The variance expired. A second variance for the same request was granted in May 24th of 2017. A 6-month extension of this variance was granted on May 22nd, 2019. The applicant is currently requesting a variance to reduce the rear yard setback from 30 feet to 15 feet. So I'm sorry, it is a different variance request in the rear. And to reduce the side street setback from a minimum of 15 feet to 12 feet 11 inches. The applicant has reduced the footprint area of the proposed single-family residence from the previous proposal. However, the revised building design will require a small encroachment into the side street setback for a proposed privacy wall that is really a structural component of the building and therefore requires a variance. The requested variances are needed for the construction of the residence, primarily due to the irregular shape of the property. This lot was created in 1924 as a part of the H.C. Clark subdivision plat, and therefore is a legal non-conforming lot of record. And again, we've reviewed this application for the criteria for granting variances and find that it does meet the criteria. The variance is primarily due to the irregular shape of the lot. It is 24 feet wide at one end and 90 feet wide at the other end. So again, this has gone for previous variances to build on this irregularly shaped lot. So that is a unique hardship with this site. And again, this lot was legally created back in 1924, so it is not the result of the applicant's actions. Staff is recommending approval of the variance for relief from the minimum rear setback requirement and the minimum side setback requirements, subject to the condition that the variance expires 2 years from the date of approval.
Okay, thank you. At the risk of being kind of tedious, just one minor correction. It's the former city manager Barnes would be upset if we got his father-in-law's name wrong. It's H.L. Clark. Harry L. Clark was Charlie Barnes' father-in-law. So that's the subdivision.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Charlie, you up there? Okay, any comments from the board first? Let's hear from the applicant then, please.
Stumblers on behalf of the applicant. Does anybody have any questions? Do I need to clarify anything?
Maybe just a point of clarification, because we're talking about the rear yard and side yard. Sometimes on these irregular shaped lots, it's like, where's rear, where's side? So requesting the 15-foot rear setback, that's in this schematic here. That's this part that's sticking out here. Am I correct, sir?
Yes, that's correct. That's a box. In other words, there's no bottom, there's no floor, and there's no lid. We have that as part of the design, and it will be.
Oh, so that's this.
That's correct.
Gotcha.
I've got a bigger rendition of it if you want to see it.
Okay.
But that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what I have.
And then the front setback is this little piece right there, which I'm assuming is this corner of
That
that
corner
wall.
and the other corner to where the box is.
Oh, yep, third one.
There's
Yes, sir.
two small encroachments on that side.
Gotcha. Here and here.
Did you say you had a large rendering? I think the public might be benefiting from. See what you got there?
This is what you have there, just a blown-up version of it. The side setbacks are this point here and this point here. On this side here is where we have the,
Mr. Blitz, for the record, can you say east or west, or, and on the tape, we want to know, when you say here, we don't know where here is. So
I'm sorry.
Can you be a little more specific?
on the north side of the property is Tallahassee Drive, and we have two encroachments from the side setbacks. South side, excuse me, thank you. Towards the rear faces east. And this encroachment is what we're talking about, the box, where you have, we also have a rear version of this, and it gives a little bit deeper and dimension-wise, and to show a lot more detail. But that is the only encroachment as far as the rear property goes.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay.
Any more questions from the board?
Yeah, my question would be, what has been the issue again with this particular property?
Well, my client has been going back and forth to Belgium because his mother's ill, and that's where he is now, and that's why I'm here for him.
Could you be on the closer to the mic, please? Thank you.
He's been in Belgium twice since our last hearing in May to take care of his family matters. Second thing is the design. We've been trying to find the right engineers and the right architects to get it done right, and we finally did. And after that last hearing, they went back to the drawing board to double check and put it into the final form, and it showed that we might need the encroachments, and that's why we made this new request. But it's taken some time to figure out feasibility. It's taken some time to figure out the design. It's taken a lot of time to figure out what contractor would be able to do the building.
correct me if I'm wrong, was there an issue with this property originally with moving a pole,
To the right.
a telephone pole or
I
power pole?
requested that before, but I don't think,
No, back originally. I'm just trying to get a check in my own
that was
brain.
the first one that expired. yeah.
That's, I'm just curious if we're talking about the same property.
Yeah, it is the same property.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
I just want to say one thing. This is a unique design for Tarpon Springs. That's a very,
Yes, it
very
is.
excellent.
Cutting edge materials, cutting edge design. The interior is going to look magnificent. They're working on the details now, and he's putting a lot of money into this project.
Are you planning to have an entrance fee for people to visit it?
Only Mr. Onatz can answer that question, sir.
All right, if we're ready for comments from the audience, if you please would come forward, state your name and your address. Please.
Okay, Bruce Huffman, I'm 1716 Tallahassee Drive, directly east of this monstrosity. I mean, I don't know how to say how ugly that picture is, and I don't want to look out my front door, my windows at it every day. Plus, now you're going for less setback. You're going back to where we were 40 years ago, to a house you condemned and had torn down, and you're going to put another house right back in the same place? Where's the sense in this? And then you're coming up with this house that doesn't fit anything in the neighborhood. I don't understand how we can allow this. So,
Can I answer you?
please.
Frank Lloyd Wright in 1952 said, "Less is more." This is a unique house right here. I don't
That's
see where
very
you see a
unique.
problem with this advanced. if
Could
you
I
can
ask
say
our
advanced.
legal counsel, do we have any right to get involved in how the building looks at all?
No, and as I said before, the only thing this board can do is take the evidence presented at the hearing and apply it to the criteria in the Code of Ordinance and determine whether or not the applicant qualifies for a variance. Whether or not what the aesthetic appeal of the building is, or whether someone likes it or not, is not relevant to this application. And that's something that is determined, if by anybody, through the building permitting process.
So you're saying that just because it doesn't fit the neighborhood, it's totally bizarre to the neighborhood?
That this board can make a decision on, one way or the other.
What board does?
And that's not a question that I can answer for you. You need to go to the city with that.
I thought you guys are the city.
Actually, this board is independent of the city. The city is these two people right here.
Okay, well, how about one of these two answering?
Well, I'm not going to take the,
Let's try to answer if we can. Patricia, or I'll try, maybe I shouldn't. but
I'm
Louise?
going to ask that you don't, and we just
All right.
let
Okay,
the
I'm
city
just gonna
answer
throw an
that.
example out. You couldn't put this down in the sponge docks. I mean, it wouldn't fly down there. Now, if you put it out on, say, Point Alexis or Seabreeze, where there's a lot of modernistic houses, I can see it. But don't, jam it down our throats. Nobody wants it.
Again, that's not something that this board can make that determination on.
Yeah, and plus you're encroaching on everybody. We can't walk down the sidewalk. It's going to be how close?
Okay, one at a time, please, okay?
What's that, Herb?
Thank you.
People in the audience are speaking. I want to hear one at a, we'll take all night if we have to, but let's do one at a time.
Yeah, I don't see how we can put, in good conscience, put it there. Like I say, you're putting it right back in the footprint of an existing house that you condemned and had torn down for zoning violations.
But was the reason that the previous home torn down for zoning violations because of setbacks, or was it for other reasons?
It was for all the reasons. There were setbacks, there was building code violations.
I'm personally familiar with what happened. I could explain it.
I'm going to ask that you don't because it's not relevant to this application whatsoever.
I would say, it's not relevant.
Well, why isn't it relevant? I mean, you're
Well,
putting
she's
the house
objecting.
back in the same place. It
Well,
seems very
I could
relevant to
answer that
me.
one for you. We don't make a decision on what your request is, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent. That's the real deal. That's just it in a nutshell. So you could give us the bomb of an answer, and we're still going to just look at you because there's nothing else. We don't make decisions on cosmetic things at all. And we've
Okay.
had this with other cases where people have filled our audience because they didn't want a gas station in the town of Tarpon. And we couldn't make a decision whether we wanted it or didn't want it. Does it fall within our criteria? Then it's a go. If it doesn't fall within our criteria, then it's a no-go. And it's just that simple. But I'll listen to you say it again.
Well, to me, it doesn't fall in any of the criteria because you can't follow the setbacks without your committee saying so.
Well, this is a non-conforming lot.
Okay, he knew that when he bought it. He
I
should build on
understand.
what he can build on.
Then we would have extremely limited lots throughout the whole city in which people could develop and live.
And this board wouldn't exist.
Right.
Look at all the money saved.
Well, we're
We're
paid.
They're
free.
paying
Nothing.
so much to be here.
Well, you'd be.
I would say
on
gas
TV.
money. I mean, that's about it.
They don't pay us.
All right, well, I guess I got nothing else to say then.
Thank you.
Hear from you again if you'd like. Next neighbor, please.
Instead of standing back of me. Can he sit down, or it just feels like somebody's hovering over my back if I'm standing? Thank you. Yeah, thank you. My name's Lisa Bobber, Balog, 1710 Tallahassee Drive. I grew up in this neighborhood, so I'm pretty familiar with nothing being there from Tallahassee to Howard Park. We used to have horse trails, stables, in front of the high school, rode our horse there. This corner lot was a non-conforming lot. It's a pie shape. It's funny, you know, what can you actually build on it? I'm sure there's architects that can figure things out. My father was a builder, Class A builder. On the first application, he went into the same thing. The sides setbacks and the rear setbacks. You mind? He was denied that. Then he came back in again, and he was granted rear setbacks. Okay, he wanted 20 feet. Well, the original one, they wanted the sidewalks wavered. They want the concrete wall, like he said. And does that conform to people walking their dogs, going to Sunset Beach? By encroaching on the public space on the variances, how does that help the neighborhood? When he purchased it, he knew. There's people here that looked at it to buy it and said, it's non-conforming. I wouldn't take that gamble. There's nothing you can put on it. But I have 7 cards of every time that he's trying to keep changing and keep going through. I went through the neighborhood with my cousin and neighbors. We got a petition signed from 3 streets only, one day, 66 signatures of the neighbors that don't want the variances changed. They had to follow the setbacks. They had to go by the codes on every single street. And there's 3 people that couldn't make it tonight that were denied things they wanted to do on their property or things, but here's the codes, here's the variances, you deal with it. Now he says you have to find a builder. well, geez, I think the guy is a builder. And as far as a hardship, he's claiming a hardship to change this because it's a non-conforming lot, because he wants to build his dream home. That's what he said in the first application, okay? I have on Zillow before it was taken down. He'll sell you the property or he'll build you the dream home, and he has prints for it. So he's not doing it to build his dream home. He's doing it for himself, to make a profit. Give me 1 second. When we got the first notice, I went around and got signatures for the first hearing. That's these, not to change the setbacks. That's 186 on the last one. My allergies are back, so please forgive me on it. Now, when he shows this picture of the house, I have no problem with people build. But you follow the law just like everybody else. My father was building a family center at the church. They had wetland areas. He had to plant 75 trees and put water and, and it wasn't even their property to take 3 trees down. Can you?
I keep going.
Thank you. So I don't know how the rules can change for somebody else knowing, here's your space you have. If I have a living room and I go to get furniture, I'm not going to sit and get an entire room full of furniture. You have to measure your wall and say, okay, this is what you can put in it, period. And he knew it. And he's just using the law, the hardship law, to say my dream home when he's going to sell it. And I just think it's unfair. Now, as far as his bump out in the back for his variance in the backyard, the setbacks, Bruce's home, his backyard is Bruce's front door. That's his living room window that he wants to, that point is directly in his living room window. That is his view that he will see out his door. It's going to be bad enough if there's a house there, but can you imagine it being from me to her or me to here, 15 feet? I don't even think it's to you. I think it'd be right here, 15 feet.
Mr. Burris?
You mentioned sidewalks.
Yeah, I have it right
On that
here.
side of the street,
There's sidewalks on both sides of the street.
where this property,
Yes, sir, right now.
and when this property is built, sir, will it have sidewalks?
We'll still have sidewalks, yes. There won't be blocking anything.
Okay, another thing, second question, if I may. You mentioned 2,000 signatures or 1,000 signatures, however many you have there? Okay. How come none of those, the last 3 times, were not presented or nothing was already included in today's hearing?
Because the rear setbacks went from 30 feet to 20 feet,
Yes.
okay? Then this time it went side setbacks that were already denied in 2014. And now he wants 15 feet setbacks, not 20 feet, in the original 30. So it's like, it's not bad enough that you're not getting your 30 feet and you're going 20. Okay, now you want 15 feet? And now you want to encroach further into the main road? So when you're coming down Tallahassee Drive, all you're going to see, you have nice uniformed homes like this, and all you're going to see is a big box sticking way out, encroaching on the main view.
You mentioned 2014. The
Yes, sir.
history that we have starts at 2015. Was there another hearing in 2014?
I have my postcard 8/15 of 14. I have
I don't think-
8/8/14.
And that might have
10/4.
been on a different variance, but either way, that's not the variance that's before the board today. And as to the signatures and the petitions, that's not relevant evidence to the variance application. So I'm just going to ask that
So it
this
cannot
board
be
not.
submitted, in other words.
No, the only relevant evidence is that which is presented at the hearing. If there are any affected parties who are wishing to testify and present competent substantial evidence, you can consider that, but petitions from residents
Does it count?
doesn't count.
In that case, Okay, go ahead, let's finish up. and
That's it,
I'll
so.
make a recommendation, okay.
Can I?
So the view of the neighborhood, the people of the neighborhood have no say on how they want their neighbors to look?
If you are
Feel?
if you are an affected party under the statute, you can come to a quasi-judicial hearing before a Board of Adjustment, and you can demonstrate that you're an affected party, and you can present evidence that is against meeting the criteria for the Code of Ordinances for a variance. Whether or not you don't like the way that the building looks.
I don't care how it looks.
Right, but I'm saying
I'm just
if you don't
saying
like
it's
the right, but if you're not able to present evidence as to why it doesn't meet the criteria established to get a variance, then it's not relevant evidence.
All right, well then, if you're standing outside your front porch and you're looking down the street and you're looking at the Gulf and you're paying taxes for that Gulf view for years, and I'm talking 60 years, and now all of a sudden you're gonna look at like this from your driveway and you've got a building encroaching. It's not enough, you know it's gonna be built, but it's still, I don't care, a foot's a foot. You look at all the trees growing down there. All right, we used to put our canoes right there. You can't even walk down there. You can't even get to the water because of all the, and they let them just grow, and you can't even see the sunset anymore. So it's troubling.
I got a question.
Yes, love.
Why no other neighbors are here today?
Well, we just
Oh,
got the.
we have more, okay, please, okay, that's fine.
These are immediate
That answers my
neighbors.
question.
These are the ones that are.
If they get up
affected.
and if they can demonstrate that they have an affected party status, then they can speak. They have the right to ask questions of the applicant, they have the right to ask questions of staff, and they have the right to present evidence, either expert testimony or their own testimony. But otherwise, it's public comment, and public comment does not bear on whether or not a variance should be granted or not.
I have a question. In the rear setback, I know we're speaking about 15 feet, but we're speaking about part of the room is on the setback line, and the 15 feet is just what you'd call the 90 degree of the triangle.
Yeah,
It's right here. Okay.
It's
So-
this floating,
It's
Corner.
this corner right here.
right. Well, see,
So-
Bruce's house is a two-story, it's a one-story on stilts.
Right.
So his primary residence is on the second floor. So his door faces their rear.
Right.
And his living room window, his main house living room window, is going to look at that point that's going to be even closer to him.
But your comment earlier, and this is what I'm trying to clarify, you said your name is Bruce? That Bruce, front door was being blocked. Now
Well, that's what
is,
he's looking at, that, his living room window.
let me
his
just
main- I'm
finish
sorry.
my thought here. So are you on Tallahassee? So on Tallahassee, the front of the house faces Tallahassee, doesn't it? Please do. Because to me, it looks like it's the side of your house.
Can I have one of your renderings? I can show you better where my house lays out on the rendering than,
yeah, and I think is that your house I circled there?
yes. Did you have a different drawing?
Oh, okay, of this. So your house is here.
It's here. My front of the house is on Tallahassee, faces south. But my front door, or the entrance door, is on the west side of the house.
Okay.
So you come in under the
That's
house.
So
all I
what is
needed.
your, so what
That's
is
all I
your
needed to know.
setback? What is your setback?
Can you go to the microphone just for
Oh,
the
I'm sorry.
record?
Yeah.
Take- I still wanted to ask you, I needed clarification from Bruce, because Your earlier comment that you made, and I listened very carefully, is you said that this gentleman that's building this house knows that this was going to be what you call an eyesore. But Bruce would have had to know that when he built his house and made his house, that the front door was going to be facing something.
He knew that.
Right. So I'm trying to clarify your comment to this gentleman about how he knew this was an eyesore. Bruce had to know that he was going to have something, as he called monstrosity, built there, correct?
Okay,
But here's the difference.
Wait, can
On
you,
the
on the
microphone,
microphone, please?
okay, when we put our house up, we knew it was a non-conforming lot. We just assumed that nobody was ever going to build on it because it's such an irregular lot. But if everybody holds the setbacks that the whole neighborhood has to, I don't have a problem with it.
All right, let me answer that for you. That's why we have a board here. And yes, you're correct as far as the correct setbacks for a permit. But what we do here is we look at the extenuating circumstances, particularly with a property like this. They're entitled to build on it, whether it's a monstrosity or not, whether you like it or not. And what I'm looking at, honestly, is not a 15-foot setback. I'm looking at a corner of it is sticking out. So,
It's, you know, like Lisa said, a foot is a foot. It doesn't matter.
yes, but we deal in feet here. So when you say a foot is a foot, I understand that.
I invite the whole board, to please come out to my house. We'll stake out what he wants to build. Look at it. Tell me what
So-
you think. Hold the picture up,
'Cause it's a
stand
whole
on
lot
my
different
front
when you're
porch,
standing at
and
that
look.
lot.
Let's let the board speak a little bit. and
So
then we'll get back.
what was, so prior to this, there was the other home that was on the property. So your view then was of this dilapidated home that was condemned and torn down.
It was a beautiful house.
Brand new.
Can I interrupt here? That's not, and I know what you're trying to do, but that's not relevant to this application. What was there before, what you have a right to a view, you do not. Any of that, that's not relevant. I'm just going to ask for the purposes of the record, we need to stick to the criteria and evidence that is relevant to the criteria.
Okay, so you're going to tell me I can tear down my historical home, downtown Tarpon, catty corner from the Greek church, and put that up, and that's okay? Put it right out in the front
Well,
corner?
in that, on that location, you probably have to talk to the historical review board because that is the
Of
zoning
course.
for that
It's
location.
also not relevant to this application.
But it's informative.
Can I ask one last question?
We need to plow some new ground with some other people, I think.
To close this conversation, if someone got a permit to build a barn with 4 windows and a door, would you still have an objection because it's a barn?
If it fits the setbacks, if they're 24 from the front.
Or you don't
from
care
the-
if it's a barn or it's this drawing then, you just care about the setback?
To me, a barn would be much more attractive
Then
than
Mr.
that
Eisner's
house.
point that we have to follow the criteria on an irregular lot like this, we have no choice but to approve it.
All right. Now, he's going in for this rear setback. Now, is he,
Ms. Balog, I don't mean to cut you off. You can come back, but let's hear from the rest of the people in the audience.
they
if you
didn't
don't mind.
swear in, but okay.
I can
We were-
swear
We can
them in
swear
if they
them
need to
in.
be sworn in.
Okay, very good.
And then we'll come back
Someone
to
like
you.
to
I don't
speak.
want to,
Yeah.
okay.
Come on up. Come on up, sir.
Was he sworn in?
He can be.
Swear him in when he. Sir, before you begin, I just need to swear you in. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. And if you could just state your address for the record as well, so we
I
can make
am,
sure you are an affected party.
1716 Mexico Avenue. We received one of the little notices.
Your
I have
name-
a
your
question.
name?
Thomas Creed. I have a question about the rendering. That rendering is nothing that's actually going to be built, right? There's no guarantee that you're building that, right? You're talking about building it. So let's, if you take that box that you have on the rendering and you approve this setback, then he can next week say, well, wait a minute, I want to build right to that corner, all the way to the box, because the setback will be approved by you all. So I have the feeling that could be what's happening here. And there's no guarantee that he's going to build this rendering. And he didn't, and these architects and all these other people that are involved, we don't really know anything about that. So, but I was just wondering, he's not required to build that exact rendering. So if you approve this variance, he can build right to that corner of the box that this gentleman was talking about right here. And that house will then look, when you come down the street, it will clearly set out from the rest of the street as you come down Tallahassee. And a second question is, why is Shore Drive the front of the house? Why isn't Tallahassee the front of the house like all the rest of the houses on the street?
Because that's how it was platted.
Well, if it was platted with 30-foot setbacks, and so it can be changed, anything can be changed then?
That's a call for the city. And to your point, I do have a question for the city as a point of clarification. Has the property owner applied for, is he in the permitting process for this?
No.
Well, that's a question for
That's
the
a question
city.
for the city.
And I
It's a
have.
question for the city that she'd like to have answered.
But if he gets this variance, he doesn't have to build any of this, but he can turn around and increase the value of the lot tremendously. As she said, it was already listed on Zillow for 3 times what he paid for it. That, I think, is the game plan here. And so that, now I understand what
if
you're
you said
saying,
it
the
before you're-
criteria.
Could we clarify that? The application said it's site-specific. Mr. Balearis, could you stipulate that that there won't be anything built without any different from what this footprint is?
He's worked so much on this, I don't believe there is another plan. He's never spoken of that.
Well, your application
We don't
said
know.
it's site-specific. This variance you're agreeing that there's not going to be any additional encroachment into the setback area,
I don't believe he has plans to do anything different.
but you're not.
You're not answering the question, though.
But there's nothing, we put so much time into it, and
You
that's
can-
the only thing- that's the only way
And
we
we
can.
can.
And the board can add that condition.
All right, we can do that? The board, in this motion, if it's going to be granted, I'm not speaking for the board.
Good point, thank you.
I was going to ask that question, that it's site-specific, and the condition, if the board makes that motion, I'm not speaking for the board, it would only be for what's been submitted tonight. All right, yes, sir, please.
Yep. Do you swear from the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I'm new at this, okay? I'm Norman Anion. I live on 1710 Gulf Road. Tallahassee's right in my backyard. My fence is right there by the property. I just have a couple of questions on this. Okay, I've heard everybody's point, and the thing is, a while back, we got a variance for the property, maybe 2 years ago.
You personally?
No, the owner.
Okay,
Okay,
yes.
from what I've seen, because I've seen the sign go up in the past, and went up and got another extension on the variance to put the house on with the setback going closer to the neighbor's property. I understand that, and I have no complaint. But now, I see the sign pop up, and I'm there, oh, wait a minute, now we're gonna expand it again. My question to the board is this the only house design that can fit on this property, or where was the design of the first house that was going to be up, the footprint that could have fit there that we gave the original variance on? Now, all of a sudden, you're asking for an extension of another way with the variance because we want to put a so-called maybe bigger structure or something, or you're gonna, is that part of the issue? Or could a property, a house fit on the property as the way the original variance was?
As far as what could fit on the property, that would be, for the applicant, but I do see, in our notes here that this design that's before us today does indeed have a smaller footprint than the plan that was submitted with the variance 2 years ago. So this is
Okay.
a smaller footprint.
So what you guys are effectively saying is, 2 years ago, you had a structure that would fit, a footprint that would fit on the property with the existing variance. So,
Well,
is that what I'm hearing?
Can I clarify? That's not necessarily true. So this board doesn't issue permits. All this board does is take the evidence that's presented and look at 7 criteria and say, does it meet these criteria in order to vary what's in the code? Then if the variance is approved, the applicant has to then go through the permitting process. There's no guarantee that that project will ever get permitted. because there's other things that have to be considered and steps to go through. Most people come to the variance board first, the Board of Adjustment first, to make sure that they can even build that. So whether or not that previous structure could have been built or would have been built is not necessarily relevant. What
For
is
you
relevant
guys.
would be is if this is the minimum variance required, and that is one of the criteria, and that's something for the board to consider.
Okay, so here's what I got though before this board, okay? I'm just a common sense person, okay? If we had the original variance, you gave it out, and we were gonna build a structure there. We just, for some reason or another, it just kept getting dragged on and on, pushed out because it could be permitting, financial. It could be some reason why it's been put out. So now all of a sudden we're coming back and, hey, I'm gonna go for a different variance. Why would you guys approve the first variance if you couldn't fit property on it in the first place? And the permitting, now this is going on for years, so it might not even be any of your responsibility, but if this has been going on for years, so that first part had to get somewhere along the permitting property. Who gets a variance and waits 2, 3, 4 years?
They
before
do.
even-
A lot
they
of
do?
people.
Okay. But, so if I bring it back though, my question really is, and I don't know if I'm really gonna have, you guys have the responsibility is, if another structure is gonna fit on that property with the original variance, I would say that we should keep within those guidelines. Not say, hey, let's just stretch the variance this way now and this way, because we got a different design. We should try, if something can fit in that, and you guys are all pretty smart. You've been doing this for a long time, I bet, that you've seen a lot. From when I'm listening to the first couple, and listening to you talk and everybody else, you guys, you know what you're doing, okay? But I'm trying to figure out on the common sense approach why we have to expand this one now. And this doesn't, I live nearby, but it's not like my window. Hey, I expect to have neighbors, but I'm just trying to figure common sense. This should have been taken care of in the first time. Now we're coming back and trying to expand it, and that concerns me.
Let me answer your question for you. We deal with every single variance as it is its own. So last week, last month, last year, or 10 years ago, you could bring a case here and say somebody has a 6-foot fence, and we could deny the 6-foot fence, and you could say, but look, you gave it to somebody else. That has no bearing on us whatsoever. So, and to answer your common sense with common sense, that's not how we make our decisions.
Okay.
Each case that's being brought up, this is to us, we'll ask questions about what happened because we want to see that things are not just sitting there and lollygagged, as they say. But that's not going to be a determination of how we make our decisions. We have to make our decisions according to the evidence that the client brings us and the people in the neighborhood.
So if your client comes back here in 9 months or a year and says, hey, I've got a different design, I need to get a variance to expand my property the other way, you guys.
They could do that.
They can do that. They've
And
got
you
to go
guys
through
can
the
just
whole
get
And
it
they
right.
could
program
continue to do that as long as they keep wanting to pay the city the application fee.
and go through all the
So-
process.
Okay, so I got you on this so far already. So now, when the permitting process comes up, is this just done in the office, or is the permitting process done with
We have-
people, public input?
And we have no idea, and we don't speak on how the permit department gets done, but we have to speak about whether this fills all of the criteria. We have our criteria here that we read, and we have the response to it. And if it jives with all of those criteria, it's a go, unless somebody could come in here and explain why one of these are not. And it's not a cosmetic thing, it's not,
Oh,
this
yeah,
is.
right. It
Yeah,
doesn't
but
matter.
I'm just saying, we hear every kind of reason. We're not allowed to consider finances. So I'm just giving you, as a common courtesy, some of the reasons that people will come in front of this board, and they think it's a great reason, but we can't acknowledge that as a reason at all. You follow me?
I follow you. I'm not going to say I can't say I fully agree
But then
with
here's
your
my-
guys' process, but it's okay. It's my first time before a board. It just
Well-
concerns me. I'm learning something new, but it seems like, honest to God, go ahead. He has a
I
question
was,
at the
hold
same
on,
time.
1 second. Then what I would love to do is invite you to all of our board meetings, and you would be amazed at how much you would learn.
Keep changing that house lot, and I maybe
Let's
will.
stick to the issues.
But no, you guys,
Mr. Burris?
honest, Yes.
I have a question for the city. On the order of granting a variance, May 24, 2017, this board was in session. Item 7, the granting of this variance will support the character of this single-family district and will not create a nuisance. Why is this sentence in here? That's what everybody's complaining about, isn't it? Why can't we hear from the people out here?
That was a variance 2 years ago.
I'm sorry?
The 2 years ago?
That was in 2017, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So is this sentence in the new order that we're about to decide today? I didn't get a chance to look at that.
The same criteria.
If it's
Our
the same
criteria is the
criteria,
same.
then that's the character everybody's talking about.
Okay, so anyways, so I'm going to finish up.
Well, I think Mr. Burris
Oh, go
had a
ahead.
question for this, that was your question to the city,
And
correct?
can I piggy on that? Because it's similar question. In the staff analysis, it says, under 4, it says granting of the variance request will allow construction of a single-family residence that is generally comparable in size and configuration to other houses in the neighborhood. And I think that's what he's asking. So in your opinion, are you using that word configuration differently than, I think some of the neighbors and the size and the structure and everything, the aesthetic is very different to other houses in the neighborhood, but in your language, you're saying it's comparable in size and configuration. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. It's definitely not a question of aesthetics. Generally, when you build a home, you use right angles to develop it, and you can tell by the shape of the lot, it's sort of triangle shaped, and that's more of a
Excuse me, sir,
conventional
would you mind sitting
design.
down, please? You're taking away, yes. Would you mind sitting down? You're taking away from our listening to the city. Please sit down.
So yeah, that's really what I mean by compatible and consistent with other houses in the neighborhood. It's a conventional design house, although it doesn't look aesthetically like other houses. It uses right angle sort of development. That's common construction techniques.
Can you
So,
answer the character question
yes.
of the neighborhood? You didn't answer the character question. You answered,
Yeah, and it's generally along the same lines as
is
a character.
it this design is the same as the character of the rest of the neighborhood, sir?
Well, it's
I like the design and all that, but is
when-
it
when
the
we say-
character of the neighborhood?
when we say character, we don't mean the
What do we
aesthetics
mean?
or paint or things like that. It's a single-family home that's not that's of a conventional construction, I should say. So yeah, it's a good clarification, but yeah, we're definitely not speaking to aesthetics of the neighborhood because paint designs can change and people have all sorts of different tastes as far as what's appropriate. The city, as you know, unless you're in the historic district, does not have any regulations regarding the style or the architecture of the home. We just regulate as far as zoning goes.
Citizens are objecting specifically on the character of the neighborhood.
That's
Yes.
not-
That's the answer that,
Right, and I believe what Mr. Cerna just said is character in the planning context and in the code is not defined as aesthetics. It's defined as the size of the property, it's defined as how the property is built, that it's a single-family home. That's the character of the neighborhood, and I don't see that that's specifically called out.
So it's, for example, it would be that we wouldn't have a tiny house in the middle of a neighborhood full of McMansions, or vice versa.
Yes, it's
That
not
kind
an
of thing.
unusually small home, or it's not of a shape or of a construction that's not compatible with the neighborhood. But again, yeah, it's not, the character doesn't deal with aesthetics, so that's a good clarification.
All right, let's hear from other people who haven't
Okay.
spoken yet, and we'll get
Oh,
back
yeah,
to
okay.
those.
I just wanted to finish up. I only get like 15 seconds, please, if I could. Okay, I understand, look, when this lot was bought, we knew it was a small lot. I looked at it myself, okay? I knew a tiny house was gonna have to go on this if I bought it. Did not buy it, and I bought another property, but I understood that a small one was gonna go there. Now, I understand about the variance, and I got this thing that I learned tonight that you guys.
This is
with the
15
variance
seconds.
things-
What's your question?
All right, well, the thing is, you're going for a second variance, so we're going up the variance after variance. You guys don't have a right to turn down a variance, from what I'm gathering.
Yes.
It has to go to the permitting board.
No.
Well, we have both. We
Okay,
can turn it down
so-
or accept it.
What I'm asking you guys is, I think we stick with the original variance and not go with all this other stuff and say, hey, this is what you gotta do.
Can't do.
That's only my recommendation to the board.
That
okay?
we can't do.
We have to go by
The
what
past
is
is
the
the past.
application. So the applicant has requested this 15-foot variance. If he would like to submit a different application for a 20-foot variance, then that is his choice, and then that would be the application in front of us to make that decision.
Anybody else we haven't heard from? Okay, seeing none, now let's go back. Mrs. Balog, do you want to make a comment?
Anybody else?
Mr. Hoffman? Gentleman in the back?
Come
forward.
come on up. Speak now or forever hold your peace, as they say.
If I could just swear you in. Raise your right hand for me. Raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
So sworn.
My name is Richard Renner, and I live at 1706 Gulf Road, and the back of my house is right on Tallahassee. Now, this is a cobblestone street, a brick street that I don't know how many years that's been there. But to me, living there, it seems historical, and I love it. And we have so many people. I heard that you said there's not going to be a sidewalk. I think there should be a sidewalk, because there's one there now. There's so many people that walk their dogs, they exercise, they run, and I don't want them out in the street.
I believe if the city can clarify the sidewalk
Are going to put a
situation?
sidewalk in?
Applicant
Yes,
said.
that was
Yeah,
clarified.
The sidewalk will remain, it's not being removed. as a
Good.
result
And the
of this.
applicant is putting a sidewalk in.
This is excellent. This is great. And what if you tear the street up? You going to replace those brick?
Well, we're not actually doing the work. That would be.
I live on a street that we did that, and let me tell you, wow.
One other comment. I'm from Ohio, and I moved here especially to this town because I looked around, and it's a beautiful place to live. And I like how the city's so slow. It's taken me to get a permit 7 months now to put in a Generac generator, okay? Long story. But anyway, I like how you take your time and make sure that these things are right before you approve them. So that's all I'm hoping you look at this. And I know my neighbor is not going to be happy looking at the back of that point. And it doesn't fit with the neighborhood. But anyway, you're charged of the variances, and if the street's going to be good, we're going to have a sidewalk and all of this. This is great.
Thank you. And if I can, it's when I saw in my board packet this picture, because I too live on a brick street of homes that most built in the 70s, but some from the 20s on up. And we have a home, it's not my home, that is the very similar kind of this modern, sexy type of concrete and glass and everything. And oddly enough, it's like the primo house on our street, and it recently sold for crazy top dollar. No complaints for me on our property value.
We like that.
I was like, oh, okay, great. And like you were saying, is one of the things about Tarpon is we are unique. I lived in those subdivisions and 40 shades of beige, and I love not being in that.
Well, that's why our neighbors are here tonight, because we want to keep Tarpon like it is. We don't want to change everything, because it's one of the greatest places to live there is. Ran into some people up in Panama City just recently, and they said, we're going to move to Florida. And we said, where? They didn't know where we're from. They said Tarpon Springs, because they loved it so much. But anyway, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right, now I cut off some people early to give everybody a chance to speak. Now, round two, anybody else wish to say anything?
let me see if I get this right. You're saying that any applicant can come in and ask for a variance on setbacks and no matter what they've done before. So if I want to put a structure in this big and I get approved, nope, we want variance this big and now we want it this big, and it can be accepted and it has to be accepted?
It does
No, no,
not
no, no,
have
no,
to be
no,
accepted.
no.
You can put in as many applications as you want. This lovely family up here that had an application that was put in, that was approved today, we could have
Right.
denied it. They can maybe come back to us 6 months, a year, 2 years, 10 years down the road, and they want to do something else. That's another application for another thing, yes. And you can do the same.
And that has no bearing on what we did today.
Yeah. Well, our biggest thing is, like, the way the neighborhood is set. All right, when you're going down the brick road and you have your nice houses and they're all, well kept, and you see the water. Well, now you can't see the water. You used to be able to see the water from, just driving down. So now with the variances for this side yards setback.
Pardon
when
me,
you're-
hold up. Could we not have any other conversation? I'm trying to listen. Thank you.
When you're going down the road now, and it's going to be way out. And it reminds me of the houses around the bayou encroaching on the little houses when you got this big monster going from end to end of property. And you're like, boy, those poor people that have been there and it looks like shit. Huh. I mean, it does. It doesn't.
You said sugar,
conform-
right? Sugar,
Yes.
right.
I put the big on.
The side yard setback that you are speaking of
Right,
the
'cause he-
concern,
'cause
yes,
he
that
got to
side yard,
choose.
the side yard setback that he is requesting is 2
12.
feet 1 inches.
Difference.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's the size of a door. I mean, a foot's a foot.
I do want to give you an explanation, and I hope you understand. A number of months ago, we had a case that came before our board, and it was a case on the water where they wanted to build on top and block the view of a number of other homes. And we had a number of people, just like this is today, and they all complained about blocking of the view. We are not in charge of whether the person is going to block the view or not. That is up to the permit department and other people to decide whether we're allowed to build 10 feet high, 20 feet high, 30 feet high, or et cetera.
Right.
We've also had people that have come in front of our board that can only build approximately 30 feet high and wanted to build a hotel 40 or 50 feet high. And they got turned down because that's, again, something we cannot deal with. That's above our pay scale, as they say. So I appreciate the fact that you say these poor people are sitting there and they've lost their view. But that's not something that we can deal with. Now, if it was where they were encroaching and blocking around a blind turn where they were completely blocking somebody's view around and it would be dangerous, that's something that I would look at. This is his biggest encroachment is in the back of the house.
Right.
And it's only a triangle. So I have to look.
At this point.
Right, I understand
Because
that. But it's
when-
not just at this point, because we're going to make a stipulation, if it goes in his favor, that it would be according to what this diagram is, not what he wants to build, a 15-foot setback all around the house or anything else like that. We don't just approve something and then the person just decides to do whatever they want.
All right, now, in the event, let's say you do have it go through, and he gets his request, and it goes to permitting, is that the end of us being able to stay on top of it to make sure that he doesn't deviate from what he says he's doing now, like you said with that little jetty?
That's a question that I believe the city could address.
Yes, and the permitting review will be, will hold them to the requirements of the variance. So there's not a public hearing because the review at that point is really just for review to meeting the Florida Standard Building Code. But they will be held to the requirements of the variance, and any conditions that are attached to that, the review will include compliance with those conditions.
All right, so basically, if it does get approved, then the neighbors or any word at that end.
Yeah, it's just like any permit you would get for your home. I mean, nobody gets notified. It's just a standard administrative review.
Because I like the stipulations and attachments to make sure that, because it would be different if he was using this hardship to get it all changed for his dream home, but he's selling it.
What someone does with their personal property is their personal decision. You can sell your property, you can will it to your brother, that's your choice.
I was under the impression that changing the setbacks and changing the ordinance of the codes of the setbacks, you had to show to where it was a hardship to you.
Not at all.
It has
Okay.
to
Not a
be,
financial
All right.
it has
hardship.
to be a
Okay, I don't
hardship
mean a
of,
hardship
no,
financially, I mean,
it has to be a hardship of the land.
Okay.
So, like I said, there are 7 criteria that have to be met. The first
Okay.
one is that there's a hardship of the land, that what's reasonably to be built there can't, because of, the most common thing is like a pie-shaped lot. This is even worse
Right.
than that. This is a complete triangle, so.
Right, but he knew that,
See, let me give you just a little bit more so you have an idea. If the homes in the area were 2,500 square feet, and he's then looking to build something that's 5, 6, 7,000 square feet, that would not fly because it's just ridiculously, he doesn't have the area to build. On this particular lot, when you look at it, you would have to admit it is a very small lot. We've had people prior explain how small it is. So as long as he's not building something that we heard earlier was a monstrosity, you were saying monstrosity as a eyesore, but it's just the biggest thing that he could build within that span. So I know you don't have to like it, and I understand that.
Okay, Mr. Burris,
Yes, I have one last question. If you knew today what you know now, the last 2 or 3 weeks, would you have had another 20 people sitting there from the
Yeah,
neighborhood?
I just found out I got sick, and we went out one day this time to get people to come. The first time we had it, it was in the classroom, and we had standing room only in the hallway.
Okay,
So there would have been more people.
thank you.
okay. I have a question. Mr. Beliris, can you come forward? The primary objection seems to be this little encroachment on the east side, the triangle. Just discussing, just for purposes of our argument, is it possible to slide the house a little bit to the southeast? What would that do, and minimize that encroachment?
If we did that, it would throw the
West,
design
I'm sorry,
off,
southwest.
and we'd have to probably have a larger side setback.
So that's another variance.
So we're trying to,
another variance.
that's what we're trying to avoid.
So this is the least obtrusive way?
This is the least obtrusive, exactly.
Well, the closest point on Tallahassee seems to be a few feet north of the setback line. Right? You could slide it a little bit to the southwest and still not need a setback variance.
Yeah, I think it's going to affect the design, given what we're doing, given what the architects did. But if I could have a more clear explanation of that one, I could try to get a response from the architect to see whether or not we can do that design at all if we change that.
Does the board see what I'm saying? You know?
Well, for the same reasoning, you can reduce the front has just it's like a blank wall.
But we're not architects
But
or
yeah,
structural
exactly,
engineers, and I
exactly.
mean,
You're also
I
not
can't
here
answer
to
that
solve the variance problem.
Yeah.
You're here to determine whether or not the evidence conforms to
but
the
it's
criteria.
the
peacemaker.
evidence brought before us.
But it is possible to move this, use the same footprint to slide it
civil engineering, not
a little bit.
Can't answer that, sir.
All right, thank you. Mr. Huffman, can I ask you a question? Bruce, can you come up? Your building sets back, looks like 21 feet. Your side yard is 21 feet?
I believe it is.
And the proposed setback of this building, except for the triangle, is going to be, I don't have my glasses on, 20 feet?
20 in one
20,
spot,
21?
23 up
So it's
top.
going to be 40 feet away from your building, except for the little triangle.
Except for the triangle.
That wasn't the way it looked to me when I looked at it.
Well, that's
Well,
what,
that's the way it is.
Yeah,
Believe me.
so your setback from the side of your home to your property line is what?
21?
He says 21. I don't think it's that, because my stairs come out and down. It's probably closer.
But that's not the side of your home,
Okay, you want to go from the edge of the house.
which is because that's what is typically in these things.
Okay, so.
So if we're talking about your view.
His back porch or none of that bump out wall or anything, it's going to be 20 feet in. From his property line to his house is 20 feet. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm asking from your home to your property line. What is your setback, your personal setback? Which, if you are in compliance,
think
it's
it's-
30 feet.
I don't have the plans, but I'm going to say it's what, 14, 15 feet? From the front door to the,
He's not in compliance, yeah. So if you are, because, I'm sorry, I've lost shuffling my paper. Because the code requirements.
Right.
In that area is for the side yard to have a minimum setback of 10 feet with a total of 25 feet for both sides. So you could have like 10 on one side,
Right.
15 on another, as long as they add up to 25. So you're a minimum of 10 feet.
yes.
See what I'm saying? So
Right.
you're a minimum of 10 feet. He's got, at his worst point, the triangle that we've been calling it, is 15. So worst case scenario, you are 25 feet away.
Okay, that's to the triangle. And that.
The triangle.
That's his actual wall of the house.
Yes,
That's not a porch or
to
something else.
that point of the triangle.
Yeah, but I was on the finding of fact.
Things back 15 feet, doesn't that line come across the whole lot?
But we were saying if,
Across the whole lot down the side?
I understand, but we're saying that if we do choose to go forward with an approval, we would approve with the condition that they follow this submitted plan.
There could be a motion.
If there were to be a motion, that motion could have that
Have
condition.
conditions on it.
Mr. Burris?
Yes. I have a question on the present application, on the findings of fact. How come the language that was in the orders of the previous approvals, point number 7, I believe, where it says about the character of the neighborhood, how come it's not included in today's application from the city?
Are you asking me?
No, I'm asking the city.
I'm gonna say.
I'm not certain if the code was changed, but,
Well, there were 3 of them.
yeah,
prior.
The old one, was this the old
I'm looking at the old order.
Number 7 on page 2 of the old order.
Oh, here it is.
How come the same language is not on the new application?
For the character, here it is.
So I can answer that question, maybe. These are under findings of fact. I don't know what evidence was presented, without looking at the record, what evidence was presented at the last hearing on this variance of this order.
Okay?
So I'm not sure. These are the findings of fact of this board. So this board found, regardless of the criteria, found number 7.
Okay.
So that was a determination that was made by this board in the drafting of that order.
How can we get that hearings?
It's not relevant
not
to this.
relevant.
So you can get it afterwards, you can certainly ask staff for it, but that's not relevant to this application.
Okay. Thank you.
Are we ready for a motion or any further comments?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just ask that the applicant, since the affected parties got a chance to give a presentation, I think the applicant should have a chance to give a rebuttal presentation.
Okay, Mr. Bliris,
If he
you
so
wish to make a
chooses.
closing statement?
I believe the board cleared up the questions that I was going to bring and the comments that I would make, which I appreciate. My client has worked many hours on this with many people over the last 4 or 5 years. If he gets, if we're approved, he's ready to go into design, permitting, and hopefully construction. He has no intention of changing anything. I believe he went through painstakingly to make changes, and this is what we arrived to after all this time and all this money and all the energy. And I don't believe he's going to change the design. As long as it is approved by the board, I'm sure my client will be pursuing this.
Any questions of the applicant? All right, now I think we're in a posture for a motion. Motion
I make a motion for a continuance
to the next month, 1 month?
for next month.
That's going to be up to the applicant whether or not they want to continue it, because that's a procedural due process issue.
Well, we have the citizens here, and we send letters out to the citizens to come in.
Yes, and the citizens had the opportunity to come in. This is a public hearing. It was noticed publicly per statutes, per city code. If they are not here or did not otherwise submit anything, that is their opportunity to do so.
They may have an opportunity to see what the previous orders included.
They could have come and they could have gotten the packet. If there is a continuance to be granted, it is at the pleasure of the applicant whose procedural due process rights are at issue, not the board.
We object to a continuance.
Florida has very broad sunshine laws.
Okay, for the record, all right,
on the
Absolutely. Everything that we have right in front of us, absolutely.
Easy.
Absolutely.
all right, ladies and gentlemen. Wait.
says
This
it in
is
the
not-
Florida statute.
This is not Tampa Stadium, please, we're trying to have a record here. So there was a motion for a continuance. The applicant has a right to say no, and he has done so. So I think we're ready for another motion then.
My motion is to approve.
Is there a second?
That approval as stated?
As stated, as this exact schematic here.
On the condition.
So a motion to approve with the condition that the plans are to this schematic, so just that 2.5 bump out.
Correct.
Okay.
Second, Ms. Rich, discussion on the motion? I might say a few things. I don't know how I'm going to vote, really.
Want me to
yet,
say a
but-
few things
Yeah,
on
why
that?
don't you? Please, be my guest.
Well, I do want to thank everybody for everybody giving their opinions and their thoughts. I want to share my opinion of why I'm asking for the approval of it. As we read all of these findings of fact, at least I am reading them, each and every one of them, this particular diagram is in agreement to our criteria. And opinions of whether this thing looks monstrosity or not, it does fit within the criteria that we have to decide on whether it's a go or no. And, I mean, I could read you each section of it if you'd like, but nobody's shown any persuading fact that it's not. Whether you like the design or not, I'm not here to decide that. That's not what's up for grabs in this. It's just whether this fits or it doesn't. And the other thing is, I would like it to be appeasing to everybody, but it's not. And we have to sit up here, and there's always going to be a winner and a loser. I do think it will, if this is what he's going to build, I personally think it's an attractive thing, and it would bring more property value. But again, that's not for me to decide. The other thing that I would also say is that this property, even with the 15-foot bump out, is such a small amount that would be closest to Bruce's house. I know you'd like to have it perfectly, but it is a small, small amount. And then the other thing I look at, there's 2 more properties that are going to be hopefully built someday, and that's across the street, across the other side of Tallahassee. There's still 2 open properties there, correct? Well, no, because I want to finish my point. So, no matter what he built, he was going to block your view, because I looked, of the Gulf around Sunset. Anything that was going to be built would block your view. And what's going to block your view even more is when you probably come before our board complaining, possibly, I'm not saying you will, but on these 2 other areas, because that's one, well, whether they build 1 house or they build 2 houses is up to them. But you're kind of like sandwiched in there, as I can see. And, you know, it is what it is, so. That's my thing. Now you can, if you have anything more you want to share.
I prefer to wait for other people to make their comments. Anybody? No? Well, all right, I'll say a few things. Again, we cannot consider aesthetics in this district. Other districts have historical zoning preservation. In this R100 district, there is no such thing. There is no legal right to a view of the Gulf of Mexico. No public access. I mean, there could be a private easement, but there was none, at least none mentioned. Mr. Huffman's property, it looks per the survey here, is 21 feet side setback on the west, and the proposed applicant's is 16 feet at the minimum, more like 20 or 25, which is a fairly wide distance. And if there's a problem with the appearance of the structure, trees are a great way to visually screen properties. In my house, there's 3 or 4 houses around me. I can't see them because of the trees that are all around, and it works fine. So I would urge anybody that doesn't like the looks of this, they could plant trees and block their view if the motion passes. People may not like the way the building might look, but again, it's this gentleman's private property, and he has the right to build so long as he meets the building code. And the building code does not address, to my knowledge, any particular aesthetics. I could say a lot more, but I won't, so that's pretty much what I had to say. Anybody else? All right, let's hear a roll call, please.
Ms. Rich?
Approve.
Ms. Turner?
Approve.
Mr. Eisner?
Yes.
Mr. Burris?
Yes.
Mr. Elliott?
Yes. Thank you for your patience, and
Oh,
It's
yes.
already in the motion.
That's what the motion was for.
okay.
Want me to answer that one?
No, I was just going to say, I'm happy to speak with you about that in the procedural process for a quasi-judicial board and also the evidence presented, but after the hearing, because we still are conducting a public hearing this evening.
Okay, moving on then. Next is the approval of our minutes of July 24th. We've had quite a vacation over the summer.
It's been a while.
Does anybody remember what happened back in July?
All right, hear a motion for approval?
Motion to approve.
Yes, second.
All in favor, voice vote, yes?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
Could we get the minutes, like if it's in July and we don't have a meeting in August, that we get it in July and you don't test my memory?
All right, staff comments?
No comment.
2 staff members here, 3? No? Nothing? Board comments?
Welcome back.
I have a few. First of all, let's see. I was pleased to read in the newspaper that the Board of Commissioners follows common sense. Unusual. They had a meeting a week or 2 ago, and at least they didn't change the ordinance, but at least they went along with our application, our request to consider common sense in their vote, so that's good, I guess.
They, what? I'm not following what you're.
Well, over the last several years, we've been trying to get a common sense approach to the code of ordinances. You missed a lot of that, and that's.
Luckily.
And I didn't miss it, because they tried to nail me, but it didn't happen. But in any event, I guess I had friends in the Ukraine, they just passed a motion to let me stay.
I don't know him.
I just kind of made that up. That's you can delete that from the record.
That was for your TV audience.
I don't have any contacts over there. Somebody else might, but. Term limits. Anybody know anything
Wait,
about term
what were
limits?
you, I'm sorry, what were you saying that city council just approved?
Yeah, apparently the regulations did not make sense. Like our regulations often don't make sense in particular cases. We've been trying to get them to change that. They've refused. They let us go ahead and vote the way we want to, but they won't change the ordinance to make it legal, in a sense, or valid. I shouldn't say that. They have not.
No, that's right.
All right, so, well, no, because what we do is legal because we pass these rules. But in any event, the Board of Commissioners made a decision based upon what they said was a common sense approach to the Code of Ordinances, the LDC. Does that make it any clearer? Probably not.
Applying logic.
Yes.
Oh, that's.
I can talk to you
Not related
about.
to our work.
No.
It was something
No.
related, that's all. I
Yeah,
just, I
related
didn't
to
know if
their
you were
work.
saying,
Yeah, but-
because at one point at this meeting, there was some talk about us
No.
as individuals going forward.
Individually.
Let me
As
explain it to you. Let me
individuals,
explain it
yes.
to you
No, no,
my
no, no.
way.
Yes,
We're
as
not just pretty
individuals.
faces, we have brains now.
All right. Term limits. Does anybody know anything about term limits coming up
No, I've been eyeing them the whole time.
for the Board of Adjustment members? I think it's 6 years, and mine, 6 years is coming up.
I think or it's like
That is
Never
under
got passed.
discussion, and I would say I can bring that back, we can bring that back the next meeting, or you can contact the clerk directly. We do have one vacancy, as you know, Mr. Glenzer's resignation, and I believe there is an applicant or one or more applicants for that position, and I believe that will come to the board at one of their November meetings. But as far as term limits, I think that's still something that the clerk is looking at, and I
There
would
is a
need
rule,
to.
there's a code provision for, I think, 6 years. Well, you look at it, well, if we're throwing out, we're
Again,
throwing out, that's okay.
yeah, I would coordinate with the clerk, and we can get back with you.
Rules of procedure, any comments about that from anybody, about our rules of procedure?
All I know is they made me raise my hand for another 3 years.
I'd like to bring up this placard, the signed placard in the front sometime, not tonight maybe, but the ordinance to say there has to be a placard advertising the public hearing. And consistently, the placards are removed for one reason or another, and we've been told we have to have the hearing despite that, which makes sense. However, I'd like to have some discussion. I think those placards are important.
Yeah, and I'll check on that. I don't think that the placards are actually required. I think the only thing that's required is that sometimes it's the postcard and sometimes it's the newspaper ordinance.
It says in the code, I can pull it
Yeah,
out.
I think we looked at it before when Heather was still here, and I don't think that the placards are actually a
I'll look at
requirement.
it after the meeting, we'll
Okay,
see.
yeah,
Okay.
that sounds good.
All right, anything else then? And therefore, the meeting is adjourned, and the time is 8:45. All right.